want you to smile.
After you saw Oliver Stone's movie, Think Again. This is The Doors' Rockumentary.
Here's something I think you might like. This was written a long time ago, written by a guy named William Blake, late 1700s, written about people then. He could be writing about people today. It says, "For man has closed himself up till he sees all things through narrow chinks of his cavern. But if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite." The Doors.
Cancel my subscription to the resurrection. Mr. Mojo Bryson. The ceremony is about to begin. Wake up!
Name? Raymond Daniel Manzarek.
Age?
Born 2/12/39.
Occupation?
Musician, organist. We tried to explore all the possibilities in human consciousness. We tried to be, of the time, of course, 1967, 68, 69, but we tried to tap into a universal place and each person has it. We're timeless. We are infinite within ourselves. And all four Doors tried to hit that spot within themselves when they made their music.
Name?
John Densmore.
Age?
23.
Occupation?
Percussionist. It's weird when I walk down the street with my daughter and some guy coming the other way, a teenager has me on his shirt, and I don't have eye contact, and he doesn't know who I am, but I don't know. I try to stay separate sometimes, you know, to stay grounded.
Name?
Robbie Krieger.
Age?
22 years old.
Occupation?
Guitar.
It was like reality, you know. Reality is not always going to be great and perfect, you know. But with the Doors, you had the chance of it being great. And there's always the chance that it'd be lousy, too. But that's what the whole thing was about, was taking that chance.
Name?
Jim.
Occupation?
Keyboard player Ray Manzarek, who was already working in a band with his two brothers.
Jim and I graduated UCLA, graduated from college. School was finished, we had nothing to do, and Jim was going to New York, I was going to stay in Los Angeles, and about a month into the summer vacation, who comes walking down the beach but Jim Morrison? And I asked him, "What are you up to, man? I thought you were going to New York." He said, "No, I decided to stay here and write some songs and stuff." I said, "Well, go ahead, sing one of the songs."
Let's swim to the moon. Let's climb through the tide. Penetrate the evening that the city sleeps too high.
Killed me, man. The words were just, the words to that song, and he did about 5 or 6 other songs, and I thought the words are just amazing. And I could hear everything that I could play behind him, you know, all the organ riffs, all the little things that I could do behind all that stuff that Jim Morrison was saying.
Well, I went down to Ray Manzarek's parents' garage to play some blues and jam with these guys, and Ray's two brothers were there. Robbie was my friend, but he was not in the band yet. And there was this guy in the corner, bare feet, cords, t-shirt, real good looking, kind of shy and lurking around, and Ray said, "That's Jim, the singer. Never sung before, but he's our singer." Okay. And then he gave me some lyrics, and they were, "Let's swim to the moon, let's climb through the tide, penetrate the evening that the city sleeps to hide." And I went, you know, how do you drum to that?
Let's swim to the moon. Let's climb through the tide.
My friend John Densmore, who I'd known in school earlier, was telling me about this group that he was in called The Doors, and he said, "Hey man, we've got a contract with Columbia Records, you know." So I said, "You really? Okay, gosh." So next day I quit my group and I joined The Doors, you know. And of course they didn't really have a contract with Columbia Records.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side.
The Columbia contract may have been illusory, but the fledgling band knew it had something and set out to prove it in any way and any place possible.
So it was just the four of us knocking around, playing little gigs, playing bars, playing, you know, a wedding or a party wherever we could, make, you know, $10 a piece here and there.
To the other side, break on to the other side.
In the summer of 1966, the Doors landed a steady gig as the house band at the Whiskey A Go-Go on the Sunset Strip. Their introverted stage act, however, left some critics puzzled.
I get a kick out of the negative reviews. There's one in particular I just love. We were the house band at the Whiskey, and Pete Johnson, he says, "This band has the worst stage act I've ever seen. The singer sings with his eyes closed, and the guitar player wanders around like he doesn't know where he is, and the keyboard player hunches over, emoting mystery from the keys." I thought, I'd like to see that. Wow, he's trying to really dump on us, but sounds great.
A man named Jack Holtzman got the Doors' message and signed them to his Elektra Records label, where their first single would soon make them world famous. With Morrison, the Doors had a new kind of arty and self-dramatizing teen sex appeal. But the group's music was also unusually sophisticated for its time, a blend of adventurousness and restraint, softened somewhat by the absence of a bass player, and distinguished by Robbie Krieger's serpentine guitar and the partly jazzy, partly garage keyboard styling of Ray Manzarek.
I'd play the organ with my right hand, and I'd play the piano bass with my left hand. And if it hadn't been for the fact that it was a flat organ, I never would have really used it. And that's where the Doors' cheesy organ sound comes from.
In June of 1967, as the summer of love got underway, the Doors went to #1 with their psychedelic classic, Light My Fire. Their debut album likewise topped the charts, and a legend of sorts was launched.
Music can't help but reflecting things that are happening around it.
All of our music is really so symbolic rather than direct to the point, you know.
It's not that political for me, but then I'm not the lyricist.
The unavoidable context of much rock in the 1960s, of course, was the increasingly unpopular war in Vietnam. The Doors, a simple pop rock act to some, addressed the war directly in early 1968 with The Unknown Soldier, a record that became their least popular single to that point, barely denting the top 40.
Wait until the war is over, and we're both a little older. The unknown soldier. I think these days, especially in the States, you have to be a politician or an assassin or something to really be a superstar.
With their chart instincts briskly restored, the Doors bounded back to #1 with a sing-along rocker that at the very least echoed an earlier Kinks hit.
Hello, I love you, won't you tell me your name? Hello, I love you, let me jump in your game.
In all honesty, Hello, I Love You was released because we felt it had the best chance on the top 40 charts.
When the Doors would work, it was always a communal kind of thing. Somebody would start the idea. Robbie would start the idea, or Jim would start the idea with words and sometimes a melody. Or Jim would come in and put some words on top of a riff. We'd just be fooling around, kind of jamming. Or a song like L.A. Woman. Jim had the lyrics to L.A. Woman. And I just kind of invented some kind of a rock and roll, fast left hand on the piano in the key of A. And Jim started just putting the words over the top of that, and it worked out beautifully.
Most people think, I guess, that Jim wrote most of the songs and because he was the singer and all, but, you know, I did write some of the hit songs. Light My Fire, Touch Me, Love Her Madly, Love Me Two Times.
Love me 2 times, I'm gone away.
Our songs would change constantly, and that's how our songs actually evolved, is they would change on stage.
Jim would always improvise. Jim always had the freedom to stretch out and take it somewhere, and we, Ray, John, and Robbie, never knew where he was going to go, never knew what was going to happen.
Came to a door. He looked inside.
Morrison's most notorious improvisation was the shocking for its time Oedipal performance piece, The End, a song that had gotten the group fired from its Summer of Love gig at the Whiskey A Go-Go. Material such as this, and the oral sex metaphor Love Me Two Times, gave the Doors' pop rock an unusually earthy edge.
Father, yes, son, I want to kill you. Mother,
The Doors in concert it could be incredible and it could be horrible. You know, it depends on which night you came. It was like a religious experience.
When you're improvising, there were a few times when we did some god-awful shows.
Jim was like the shaman who would take them over the edge and lead them into another realm, you know. But, of course, sometimes if he was not on, it was just the worst thing that you could possibly do with your evening.
That was like the best part of being the Doors. That was the best part of being on stage. We never knew from one show to the next, from one gig to the next, from Madison Square Garden to the Forum to the Fillmore to the Whiskey A Go-Go, we never knew what was going to happen. Jim never knew what was going to happen, the audience never knew what was going to happen, and the musicians never knew what was going to happen. We sort of just tossed it up in the air, and we took a chance on fate.
Confrontation with police in New Haven, Connecticut in December 1967 was an augury of even bigger hassles and worse to come.
She's walking out the door.
Creator of being, grant us one more hour to perform our art and perfect our lives. We live, we die, and death not ends it.
The road to excess leads to the palace of wisdom. And Jim Morrison was a very excessive person. I think he had to be excessive. He had to take it to extremes. He dared to dance the shaman's dance.
People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone. Women seem wicked when you're unwanted. Streets are uneven when you're down.
The early years, we were all buddies. He was like a college guy, and we were like fraternity brothers.
But as time went on, you know, and then the star thing happened, and there was more drinking and all that, then we sort of didn't hang out that much together.
Jim was born with some kind of primal agony, a little more intense than all the rest of us, because when I met him, he was, whew.
Riders on the storm.
By 1969, increasingly out of it on drink and drugs and disillusioned with the life of a pop star, Jim Morrison, for the Doors, was a disaster waiting to happen.
Miami really turned into a disaster for the Doors. At the time, nobody really thought it was such a big deal. We knew it had been one of those Doors shows in which things didn't go right. As a matter of fact, everything went wrong. Jim was drunk out of his mind at that show. We played badly. The stage was rickety.
It was a real crazy concert where a policeman came up and Jim was wearing a hat, a skull and crossbone. This policeman came up and took it off, threw it in the audience. And Jim took the cop's hat off and threw that in the audience. And at the end of the gig, our manager paid the cop for his hat, and we were all laughing about it.
I was real embarrassed and everything, but I didn't think that we were gonna, that room had a couple of beers with the cops, and we left, you know. And then about a week later, the news comes down that Jim is under arrest for obscenity or something in Miami. And we, you know, it was a big surprise to us.
In March of 1969, Morrison was arrested in Miami for allegedly exposing himself on stage. He never served a sentence, but the case did take up most of his time for the rest of the year, and it signaled the beginning of the end.
Wild child, full of grace.
Jim would do all kinds of weird things on stage, but as far as I could tell, he never whipped it out. Nor did he ever simulate oral copulation on the guitar player, which was me.
We got into a lot of trouble, man. We got a whole bunch of trouble about Miami. Jim was on trial. Rock and roll went on trial.
There was an article in Life saying, let's see, the Doors are the kings of acid rock. And then a year later, the Doors were the kings of orgasmic rock. So I think the politicians in Miami thought, oh, let's get this group. Let's try and get them because they're an example of kids and drugs and whatever.
And I think that broke him, man. I think that's what maybe did it, you know? I think that was like the final straw. I don't know that Jim Morrison killed himself. I wouldn't be surprised if it was the weight of Miami. It was like the last straw.
In the last few years, as his drinking, etc., he would get more loaded. Then the performances went down, and I was begging everyone to get off the road because it was so great in the beginning.
But Miami was the first gig on the 20-city tour, and after the incident happened and the press got a hold of it and all the trouble and the fact that Jim was in fact arrested, every city canceled out. We lost the entire tour. Cincinnati canceled, Atlanta, St. Louis.
I would hear 10,000 people upstairs stomping, saying, "Doors, doors, doors," and we'd be ready to go up, and Jim would be under a table somewhere, passed out.
A lot of people have said, hey, why didn't you try to stop him? You know, couldn't you see that he was drinking himself to death? And yeah, we could see it, you know. John knew it, Robbie knew it, I knew it. Jim was going to die.
This is the end, beautiful friend.
With the Doors' career apparently winding down, Morrison moved with his wife Pamela to Paris in 1971 to pursue his literary ambitions. He never made another record or played another show.
When Jim left for Paris, our record contract was up, and so he was going to take a long vacation. And as a matter of fact, I really hadn't hung out with him for a year or so because I wasn't into alcohol. But he called me from Paris just a few months before he died, asking how L.A. Woman was doing, and I said it was doing great. Everybody loves it. And he said he'd been writing, and he expressed interest in making another record. And I said, get back here, we've been playing. You know?
When the music's over.
Although the exact circumstances of his death have never been clear, he apparently died in his bathtub of heart failure brought on by drugs and alcohol. Like Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin before him, he was just 27 years old.
That body is then buried in Père Lachaise Cemetery, where Isadora Duncan is buried, and again, Oscar Wilde is buried, and great artists and poets are buried in that cemetery. And of course, it's where Jim belongs.
I see a lot of young people around today who are trying to be like Jim, and they get as screwed up as they can on all kinds of drugs or whatever. And I tell them, hey, the Jim that I dug was not like that all the time, you know. That's when he did his best stuff in his early days before he really got into alcohol and got completely screwed up, you know.
What was that promise that you made? Why won't you tell me what she said? What was that promise that you made? I'm gonna love you till the heaven stops the rain.